Hello, neighbors. This is the Urbane family from Michigan, owners at the Polynesian and Riviera, and you're listening to my DVC Points.
Parents and the children could have fun together.
Please board quickly and safely. Our monorail will be departing momentarily.
Welcome to the My DVC Points podcast. Join the conversation as DVC members share their stories, personal preferences, and magical memories. Your reservation is confirmed, your fast passes are booked. Pull up on the yellow strap because our journey into the magic of membership is about to begin.
To infinity and beyond.
Now, here's your host and curator of magical stories, Chad Pennycuff.
Welcome home, neighbors, to episode 268 of the My DVC Points podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at DVCResaleMarket.com. They are the world's leader in DVC resales. We'll talk about them a little bit as we go on in the show today, as we start talking about this concept of multiple use years and when does it make sense for you as a DVC member to have multiple use years. If you're asking yourself, what is a DVC use year? It's the fundamental rules that govern how we use our points. You have 12 months in order to use your points. So if you bought a 100-point contract, you've got 12 months to use them. And the first 8 months of this contract, you can bank the points. The last 4 months are getting into the danger zone. At that point in time, the points are no longer bankable. Use year tends to matter most when it comes to cancellations, booking, and banking. Your use year doesn't matter at all when it comes to booking a reservation. All you have to do is get the points in the right use year for that particular reservation you're trying to make. However, when it comes to canceling a reservation, use year becomes critical because it's all about how much time do you have on those points that we're holding a reservation to bank them or reallocate them to another vacation. And if you're in the last 4 months, availability can be scarce and things might not work out so well for you. Before we continue, let's come in and talk about what are the reasons why you would want multiple use years. So for one, there's a couple of things in the DVC system that all hinge off of member number. And when you have multiple use years, you get multiple member numbers. So things like wait list, you get 2 per member number. So if you have multiple use years and multiple member numbers, you'll go from having 2 wait lists to having 4 wait lists. You can use 2 wait lists on each member number. You can kind of double up on your chances of finding an available room if you have the points available on both member numbers. You might be coming into yourself and saying, hey, I really want to go to Animal Kingdom. So let me put 2 wait lists on a Savannah View and a Standard View at Jumbo House, and then another 2 wait lists on a Savannah View and a Standard View over at Kidani. At that point in time, you've kind of got 4 chances of a wait list to come through as opposed to just 1 or 2. Not only is it helpful on wait list, let's talk Moonlight Magic. That's also limited by member number. Typically what happens here is Disney will come back in and they'll announce 3 dates at a theme park for Moonlight Magic with 1 registration number. If you happen to be in the area for 2 out of the 3 events, you can only register for 1 event per member number. If both of your member numbers are entitled to the enhanced benefits of the direct perks, having multiple use years will allow you to go to both of those single events. Let's talk about why not to have multiple use years. The number one reason not to have multiple use years is you can no longer DIY your bookings when you want to combine points. If you're trying to make a reservation and pull points in from 2 different member numbers, they have to be transferred from one member number to the other, and only member services can do that. So what's going to happen while you're gunning for that rare beach club studio right at 8 a.m., you might get the first couple of days into this, and if you're lucky, you can, and you'll have to call member services transfer points over, and append on another couple of days at the tail end of that. However, you can't do the whole thing by yourself. So that is kind of the number one reason. The second one, I'm going to say, is mixed, because you've got a pro and a con here. And it all comes back into that anatomy of a use year that we talked about earlier in the video. The first 8 months out of your use year are bankable. The last 4 months are not. So by having multiple use years, if you're going to come to Disney at multiple times a year, having multiple use years may not necessarily be a bad thing, because you're always going to use the use year that can be canceled and have the most flexibility. Let's take a look at this from a Run Disney perspective. I'm not a Run Disney guy, thank goodness, but if I ever did get into Run Disney, I have a February use year. That Run Disney event that goes on every January, marathon weekend, it's been going on for quite some time here in Walt Disney World, and they recently bought it back to Disneyland, and it's a January event. Well, if I have a February use year, that is my month 12. If I have to cancel that reservation and I have to do a last minute cancel, I've only got 2 to 3 weeks to use my points. It is not a good thing. It is not ideal. Again, use year matters not in terms of booking, but in terms of cancellation and the flexibility that you have here. So if I myself were to really get into Run Disney and wanted to do those January weekends, I would be picking up either an August contract, September, October, or December contract. So that when I book that January event, so that if I do have to cancel that event 31 days in advance, I have a lot more time on my use year that I can come back in and actually use my points. I might even be able to do this within my bankable window. That's where the power of multiple use years on multiple reservations really starts to make sense. There's another case scenario that I don't know that I would do, but if you're over at our sponsor's website, dvcresalemarket.com, and you're trolling along and you're looking for a contract and you find one that is just a really smoking good deal, but it doesn't match your use year, at that point in time, resale contracts, if they're the right size and the right home resort, can be pretty rare. You might want to just pull the trigger on that one and go ahead and buy that contract, knowing you're going to have a difficult time if you ever have to combine them for a single vacation. But if you're coming to Disney multiple times a year and you have the ability to bank and borrow on one contract and make a reservation, bank and borrow on a second contract and make a reservation, and you never really have to combine the two contracts, multiple use years is no big deal. You might have just found yourself a winner over at dvcresalemarket.com on all of their listings. And in that situation, it might work out perfectly fine. For myself and my family, I've made the decision that until I get into a vacationing style that regularly puts me into those last 8 months, I'm just going to keep it simple and keep everything in a February use year. That's been my choice and my decision, but I'd like to know what yours is in the comments below. Have you tried multiple use years? Has it worked out well for you? Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Huge shout out of thanks to our sponsors over at DVC Resale Market, DVC Rental Store, and Monera Financial. Also like to do a huge shout out of thanks to all of our Patreon members for your continued support. You allow us to keep the lights on and keep our day-to-day bills paid, and us creating great content for you. Hopefully you learned something in today's show that'll help you go out there and plan something magical for your family.
Ladies and gentlemen, please watch your head and step as you exit, and take small children by the hand.
Aw, chill up, Dad. You know I'll come back. With DVC.
My DVC Points is an unofficial Disney-inspired podcast created by fans of Disney Vacation Club. The thoughts expressed in this podcast are personal opinions and personal experiences. My DVC Points is not affiliated with Disney Vacation Club, the Walt Disney Companies, or any subsidiaries. We encourage listeners to contact their DVC guide or member services for official DVC policies.